Okay, good day everyone. So to continue with our discussion, we have the respiratory system of farm animals. This is my topic outline for today. So we have the respiratory system. So I will be discussing kung ano man yung background ng respiratory system, the functions of the respiratory system, yung mismong respiratory tract, tapos yung physiology ng respiration. Okay, so first, as a background of the respiratory system, we define what is respiration. So it says here that this is the process of releasing energy from food, and this takes place inside the cells of the body of the animal. So based from this description, we can see that eto mismo is under cellular respiration na. So in other hand, this is now the process wherein yung pagkain na in-intake ng animals, of course, we go back to the digestive system. Once it is being ingested, so of course, there will be actions no, of the enzymes and yung mismong digestive organs and so on until na merong mismong metabolism. Kasi tapos na sa digestion and absorption, so the nutrients now will be oxidized in the cells to release their bond energy for the utilization in the animal's body. So yun yung tinatawag natin na respiration. It is a metabolic process that occurs within the cells of organism. So there are various metabolic processes of an organism that usually require energy. And usually, kung titingnan natin doon sa digestive system, yung energy mismo can be obtained from the food. Okay, so let's go back doon sa digestive system as what I have mentioned last time, that the nutrients, no, like yung proteins, yung carbohydrates and lipids, kasi there are 6 basic classes of nutrients, pero there are only 3 basic classes of nutrients na nagpo-provide ng energy. So ano yung mga 6 basic classes of nutrients? We have the proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, water, vitamins, tsaka minerals. Pero dito, yung energy mismo na nakukuha ng animal usually comes from 3 only. We have the proteins, and then carbohydrates and lipid. Okay? So yun yung tinatawag natin yung pag-release ng chemical energy through the oxidation ng mismong cells. We call it as a catabolic process. Okay? So for the oxidation of food materials, oxygen is required. That is why the animals need to breathe para pumasok ang oxygen, since oxygen is being required for the oxidation of food materials. That is why it is needed as substrate in order for it na merong production ng water, ng carbon dioxide, and energy. Okay. Now my question is, bakit di kailangang mag-stay sa katawan ng animals ang carbon dioxide? Mainly because, take note of this, ang carbon dioxide kasi is acid. Okay, so it is acid and it is toxic sa mga tissues. That is why it is very important to expel that one from the body. Kaya with this, we can also define respiration as a process which involves yung exchange ng environmental oxygen that we get outside and yung carbon dioxide that will be expelled from the animal's body. That's why we breathe in, no? So that is yung oxygen coming from the environment, and we breathe out to expel naman yung carbon dioxide. So doon pa lang, makukuha na natin yung konsepto behind the process of respiration. Now we have here the principle of diffusion. So ano naman to? So eto yung pag-move ng gases from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. So yung exchange of gases between the cells and the extracellular fluid as well as yung between the animal and the surrounding is based on this principle. So para ang nangyayari dito, is that yung mga gas mismo will diffuse across a membrane from a side where its partial pressure is higher to a side where its partial pressure is lower naman para ma-equalize or ma-balance yung mismong diffusion ng gases. Now we have the functions of the respiratory system. So first, of course, it's for gas exchange and transport. So this is typically a gas exchange between the air and blood sa lungs mismo, and even yung gas exchange between the blood and cells at the level of the tissues or yung tinatawag natin na cellular at tissue level. So yung pag-deliver ng oxygen at saka yung pagka-expel ng carbon dioxide, which is a product ng cellular respiration as what I have shown to you a while back, yun yung major two functions ng respiratory system. Now another one is yung ventilation. So basic lang naman na to. Ito yung movement ng hangin in and out of the lungs. So that is ventilation. Then one of the secondary functions na ng respiratory system ay yung regulation ng pH of the body fluid. So this is closely associated na with the ability of the respiratory system to remove yung carbon dioxide. So under this function, we have two types ng respiratory disorder. We have the respiratory acidosis. So ito, nangyayari ito if the carbon dioxide accumulates doon sa dugo mismo since the respiratory system cannot remove it. Then, of course, ano yung magiging constraint or ano yung magiging epekto? The pH of the blood will fall. So that is acidosis. Now, for alkalosis or the respiratory alkalosis, baliktad lang. So yung blood pH will rise if the respiratory system removes more carbon dioxide than it is appropriate. And of course, yung blood levels of carbon dioxide are lower than normal. Okay, so that is yung respiratory alkalosis. Then another secondary function of this system is yung pag-provide ng assistance in temperature regulation. So of course, with the process of respiration na to. And lastly, we have the phonation. So ano to? Ito yung tinatawag natin na voice production. Okay, so yun yung mga functions. I have just only included some of the major functions na ng respiratory system. The next one, we have the two parts of the respiratory system. So first, we have the respiratory tract and yung respiratory organ. Now, ano itong respiratory tract na tinatawag? So, ito yung daanan ng hangin papasok sa loob ng katawan. So, from outermost organ, we start with the nostrils, then the pharynx, larynx, trachea, and then the trachea will branch into primary bronchi, wherein yung isa will go through into the right lung, tapos yung isa naman will go through into the left lung. And then etong primary bronchi will eventually branch out into secondary bronchi, and then etong secondary bronchi will branch out also into tertiary bronchi until the terminal bronchiole and respiratory bronchiole. Now, ang pinakaloob ng respiratory tract natin ay yung alveolar tract going through the alveolar sac. Okay. Now, in terms of division, so that is for respiratory tract. Now, in terms of division, we have two also. So we have the upper respiratory system and then the lower respiratory system. So for the upper one, we have the nose, the nasal cavity, and then the pharynx. And then for the lower, we have the larynx, the trachea, at saka yung bronchi. Okay, now going back to the other part of the respiratory system, we have the respiratory organ, which are the lungs, or dinatawag natin na lights. Why do we call the lungs as the lights of the animal? Lights kasi as long as nakahinga yung animal right after na naipanganak siya into the birth canal, kahit isang hinga lang yan, the lungs will never deflate. Kasi nandun na siya. Nalagyan na siya ng tinatawag natin na respiratory reserve volume. So kahit na mamatay yung animal, yung lungs niya will always float in water. So sometimes ito yung ginagamit ng mga farm to check whether if totoo yung sinasabi ng kanilang mga farm boys or yung mga kanilang laborers na yung biik ay ipinanganak na patay na or kung buhay pa yung biik na lumabas sa kanyang nanay. Halimbawa sa piggery, sabihin ng farmer ng farm boy mo, boss, patay na yung biik nung lumabas. So, ang gagawin nila is they will get the lungs and then they will submerge it into the water. So if yung lungs ay nag-float, no? If yung lungs ay nag-float, ibig sabihin yung biik nakahinga pa siya before siya mamatay. Pero if nag-sink yung lungs, if kumbaga sinubmerge natin siya sa water and nag-sink talaga, meaning to say patay na yung biik bago pa siya lumabas sa birth canal. Kaya that is the concept why we call the lungs as lights. Kasi it will float that one once na nalagyan ng hangin. Okay, now we go on to the respiratory tract. So first on the list is the nose of the domestic animal. So this comprises now yung parts of the face, rostral to the eyes and dorsal to the mouth. So dito, ang external openings ng respiratory tract ng animals ay we call it as the nostrils or the external nares. So usually naman ang mga nostrils nagva-vary ito sa size and shape kasi they do have different sizes and shapes of which etong nasal cartilage, no? Etong nasal cartilage ang nagdidictate. So etong mga to ang nagfo-form on these most rostral end of the respiratory tract. Now, in addition to this cartilage, the pig also possesses yung tinatawag natin na rostral bone in the tip of its flat na disc-like na nose. So ito yung pine-presume natin na adaptation sa rooting habits ng pigs. So yung ganitong ginagawa ng pigs, just like in the picture, this is a manifestation ng paggamit nila ng rostral bone nila. So kung makikita ninyo yung mga pigs ninyo or yung mga baboy, usually ganito, meron silang tinatawag na rooting habit. So yun yung gamit ng kanilang rostral bone. Okay. Meron din tayo yung lateral aspect of the nose. Okay, so this is usually being covered ng mga hair skin wherein there are two glands na usual na meron ang mga animals. We have the sebaceous glands and then yung mga sweat glands. Etong sweat glands, dito lang usual na nagsusweat ang mga baboy tsaka yung karabaw. Kasi one of the siguro hindi naman unique body characteristics. Siguro yun yung kaisa-isang downside, no, ng mga baboy tsaka karabaw. Kasi hindi sila pinagpapawisan. That is why if you will observe in the rostral part ng nose ng mga baboy, palagi itong basa. Okay? Kasi dito lang usual na lumalabas yung sweat nila. I-try ninyo na pansinin etong mga to later on. Kaya kung titignan ninyo, it is a must na kailangan na paliguan sila or they should be in a warmer temperature kasi wala silang pores na pag-oopenan ng pawis na other than the sweat gland doon sa muzzle or doon sa snout nila. Then another one, merong hairless na region ng karamihan ng mga species doon sa rostral part ng nose nila other than the horse na walang sebaceous gland. But of course, wala silang sebaceous gland but they do have numerous sweat gland which keep yung region na yon na moist pa din, nabasa pa din. So yung area na yon sa mga sheep and goat, it is being termed as planum nasal. Sa mga pig naman, that is planum rostral. Tapos sa cow, that is planum nasolabial. So for the next slide, these are the external nares ng mga various species. So kung mapapansin ninyo, as what I have said kanina, yung horse mismo, wala siyang planum. So covered lang siya ng fine hair compared dito sa mga iba. Then for the ox and sa mga small na ruminants, they usually possess a nasolabial na planum. While yung dog is nasal planum, kung mapapansin niyo naman sa pig, ganito naman sa kanila. They do possess a rostral planum supported with a, of course, with the rostral na bone. Okay, so that is for nostrils, tsaka yung nose. Now, pagpasok ng hangin sa nostrils ng hayop, meron tayong tinatawag naman na nasal chambers, which are paired and usually large chambers, and they are separated ng nasal septum. Ito yung, ang nasal septum class, ito siya, ito yung hati ng butas ng ilong. So yung membrane na humahati sa dalawang butas ng ilong natin, we call that one as the nasal septum. Ito siya. So etong nasal cavity mismo, it usually serves as a passage naman ng air going to and from the lungs. Okay, so that is nasal septum, tapos ito yung nasal cavity. Now, another part of the upper respiratory tract is yung pharynx. So, na-introduce ko naman na to during our discussion in the digestive system. So, always take note na lang na kapag pharynx, this is a common na soft tissue or funnel-shaped musculomembranous organ na common passageway ng food tsaka air. So, yung walls ng pharynx, they are supported ng mga striated na muscles wherein they usually assist doon sa pag-swallow, no? In swallowing or what we call it as deglutition. Okay, so yun yung other word ng swallowing, deglutition. And they also, aside from that one, aside from the assistance in swallowing, they also assist, yung pharynx, they also assist in phonation or yung voice production. Okay? So eto na yung three sections ng pharynx. We have the upper section or what we call as the nasopharynx, the middle section which is the oropharynx, and then the lower section which is the laryngopharynx. Okay. Now, going down into the lower respiratory tract, we have the larynx. So, kino-consider natin siya, etong larynx, as the gatekeeper to the entrance of the trachea or yung trachea. So, ito yung tinatawag din natin as the voice box. So, aside from it serves as a support to the epiglottis, yung primary function ng larynx is to regulate the size of the airway and to protect it by closing to prevent substances other than yung air mismo from entering the trachea. So capable tong larynx na to in increasing the diameter ng passageway ng air during forced respiration or yung respiration pag merong heavy exercise, and closing the opening during swallowing or as a protective mechanism to exclude yung mga foreign objects. Then second function ng larynx is kino-consider natin siya as the organ of phonation or vocalization. Kaya doon na-derive yung name niya na voice box. So papaano nagkakaroon nito? So yung contraction of muscles dito sa larynx, no? Yung contraction ng muscles dito sa larynx usually changes yung tension and the ligaments. And etong changes ng tension sa ligaments, this will cause a vibration since yung air is drawn past to them. So etong vibration na to will now produce yung mismong voice. So doon nakukuha or doon na-produce yung mismong voice. Now kung mapapansin ninyo, meron etong si epiglottis, which is unpaired na cartilage. So in other books, we call this epiglottis as the epiglottic cartilage. So usually this is an elastic cartilage wherein during swallowing, no, yung movement ng dila tsaka ng larynx, usually fino-fold niya yung epiglottis para makover niya yung entrance into the larynx. So meron tayong tinatawag na laryngopharynx, which is ito yung section kanina ng pharynx, which is the lower part ng pharynx. And yung opening niya ay tinatawag natin na glottis. And is guarded by cartilaginous flap, which is the epiglottis. Now, ano ang function ng glottis tsaka epiglottis? So, during swallowing, yung the epiglottis usually closes the glottis and keeps the food out of the respiratory tract. Di ba minsan nabubulunan tayo, wherein kumbaga bigas or hindi bigas, kanin na yung lalabas doon sa ilong natin, or it will come out with our mouth. And so the function of the glottis is supposedly, if may laman yung stomach or if nag-swallow yung animal, the glottis will close yung daanan ng respiratory system para makalabas yung food galing into the respiratory system. So pagka hindi nasara kaagad yung glottis, no? Pag hindi nasara kaagad yung glottis and nag-swallow ka ng tubig, kumbaga, what will happen? It will come out with your nose or out from your mouth. Lalo na if kanin yung nakapasok, very irritating, di ba? Kasi kumbaga very painful. Kasi syempre di naman sanay ang nose na may lumalabas na food. Kaya dapat may guard na taga-bukas at taga-close ng ating epiglottis para hindi magkaroon ng irritation. Now, next respiratory tract is the trachea, which is also known as the windpipe. So this is a non-collapsible tube formed by a series of adjacent cartilage rings para makapag-provide ng rigidity, para makaresist sa pag-collapse ng neck mismo. Kaya we can also tell na etong trachea is flexible tsaka elastic. It is because yung mga annular ligaments para makapag-follow etong tube na to sa mga movements ng neck ng animal. Okay. Then another one, etong si trachea, this is a passageway to the duct system of the lungs. So usually ang trachea, nag-i-start siya at the edge of the larynx, no? And is divided doon sa thoracic part into two primary na bronchi, which is, as what I have said kanina, each primary bronchi pupunta in both parts of the lungs, which are the left and yung right lungs. Now, etong mga principal bronchi na to, they will eventually branch out into secondary bronchi, which we call them as the lobar. Just take it down, L-O-B-A-R, lobar. Then from the secondary bronchi, it will branch out again into tertiary bronchi. So parang paliit ng paliit etong mga tubes na to. Now kung titignan ninyo, etong mismong picture dito sa baba, the walls of these bronchi are supported by cartilaginous na plates, like yung glottis kanina with the epiglottis. So when the airways will divide to the extent that they are less than 1 millimeter in diameter, yung cartilaginous na plates kanina will eventually disappear. And once na nag-disappear ang mga to, these airways will be eventually being called as the bronchioles already. Okay, so eto na yung sinasabi ko. Etong mga bronchi, okay, so eto yung mga bronchi, eto na yung trachea, each primary or yung main stem na bronchus or main stem na bronchi will enter to its respective lung. So yung isa pupunta sa left, yung isa pupunta sa right. No. So they are supported, as what I've said kanina, ng cartilaginous rings, and they further divide and redivide to form yung secondary, yung tertiary, tsaka yung terminal na bronchi. So as what I've said kanina in the previous slide, etong mga to will further divide to form yung tinatawag natin na bronchioles. Okay, so eventually, the final branch is known as the terminal bronchiole, which is sobrang liit lang, 0.5 millimeters in diameter. Now going back into the bronchioles, these bronchioles will eventually branch out into several na alveolar ducts, which now terminate in clusters ng mga air sacs, which we call them as the alveoli or the alveolus or air sac, which is mas maliit na naman of about 0.1 millimeters in diameter. And we consider etong alveoli as the site of respiration. Now to add some information about this one, based on my readings, meron daw around 750 million ng alveoli in both the lungs. Okay, meron daw 750 million, which provide etong 750 million na alveoli, nagpro-provide sila ng 100 square meter na surface area of respiration. And this is about 50 times na more than that of the skin. So this is important. Etong 750 million na sinasabi ko na alveoli, it is important because it needs to be very efficient in conducting or in taking in oxygen as well as bringing out of carbon dioxide. Therefore, yung sinabi ko kanina na yung 50 times more than that of the skin, we can see that the lungs provide much efficient na respiratory organ when we compare it into the skin. So as an additional knowledge lang din, each alveoli itself, no? Each alveoli, tinatawag din natin siya as mini lung. Parang mas maliit na lung ng lung mismo, yung alveoli. So overall, we can say na yung alveoli, they are the functional units ng lungs and they form the site of gaseous exchange. So yan yung sa bronchi. Now meron tayong tinatawag na conducting tsaka respiratory zones sa ating respiratory system. So the trachea, bronchi, and terminal bronchioles form the conducting zone. Kasi syempre, daanan lang naman siya, di ba? And these branch into bronchioles until the terminal and respiratory bronchioles. And etong mga respiratory bronchioles, actually they are very elastic kasi wala na yung cartilaginous na rings. Eto, gaya nito. This is a cartilaginous na ring. Kaya medyo may katigasan siya para tuloy-tuloy yung pag-flow ng air. Hindi siya nagko-collapse gaya ng esophagus kasi kailangan na hindi naka-block ng hangin. Okay? And the respiratory bronchioles to the alveolar duct and then the alveoli, sila naman ang nagfo-form para sa respiratory zone. Okay, so for the respiratory zone, bakit natin siya tinatawag na respiratory zone is because it includes the structures that are directly involved in gas exchange. So in here, we look at in the alveolus, napapalibutan siya ng mga blood vessels which are the capillaries. So etong mga capillaries na to, siya yung convergence ng mga arteries at ng mga veins, no? So from the big veins to venules, yung mga venules will finally branch out into capillaries. Even the arteries, from the big arteries into the arterioles, they will branch out into capillaries. So doon kaya may makikita kayo dito na red at saka blue. Of course, we go back in your cardiovascular system. Yung blue is the oxygenated blood na nanggagaling sa pulmonary artery. No? Kinokolek yan from the different parts of the body. So when the oxygenated blood goes into the level of the capillaries, yung red dito na nanggaling, etong oxygenated blood na nanggaling sa pulmonary vein, no? Etong oxygenated blood may oxygen na siya, di ba? Kasi ito from the oxygenated blood na dinadala ni pulmonary artery hanggang maging arterioles at hanggang maging capillaries, and then in the alveolar sacs, no, there will be an exchange. From the alveolus, magdi-diffuse ang oxygen and pupunta dito sa capillaries para itong blue na blood ay malagyan ng oxygen. Kaya magiging reddish ulit siya. So yung the oxygenated blood will be infused with oxygen that comes from the alveolus. And then the gas will diffuse into the capillary. So once na malagyan ito ng oxygen, itong deoxygenated blood, it will now be channeled up in another blood vessel which we call the pulmonary vein. Now, etong pulmonary vein, it will go back into the heart. And of course, it will bring the oxygenated blood to the heart para i-pump out ni heart sa different parts ng katawan, where the oxygen again will be used by the different cells of the body. And then after na maubos, no, after maubos yung laman niya na oxygen, the vena cava, no, the vena cava, which is the biggest veins, will collect them and then bring it into the heart and then to be pushed into the pulmonary artery. And this pulmonary artery will bring yung the oxygenated blood into the lungs, particularly yung alveolus for oxygenation. And so kapag na-oxygenate yan, it will be directed to the pulmonary vein to go up to the heart and then distributed to the different parts of the body. So yun ang function or correlation ng circulatory system at respiratory system, particularly doon sa digestive system. After na i-pump ng heart yung oxygenated blood, so when the blood reaches the level of the digestive system, madadagdag yung oxygen dun sa catalyst for the metabolism ng mga different nutrients na in-intake ng animals natin. So that is for the respiratory zone. Now we go on to the second part ng respiratory system kasi yung diniscuss ko mismo is yung respiratory tract. Now we proceed to the respiratory organ which are the lungs. So it says here, they are a pair of subconical, no? Subconical, soft, spongy, and elastic hollow bag-like organs with a narrow apex and a broad concave semilunar base to accommodate the diaphragm. So kaya ganyan ang shape ng lungs. Dito sa baba, broad concave and semilunar kasi nandyan sa baba yung diaphragm which divides or demarcates the abdomen. And externally, it is divided with lobes. So yung right lung, no, it is divided into 3 lobes. So 1, 2, tsaka 3. While yung left lung mas maliit daw. So it says here it's smaller with 2 lobes. So 1, tsaka etong 2. And meron siyang, etong left lung, meron siyang cardiac notch. Ito siya. So kung titignan natin, etong right lung, straight siya. Diretso to. Pero, etong left lung, meron siyang cardiac notch. Bakit kaya ito or bakit kaya naging ganito yung left lung when we compare it sa right lung? Kasi kung titignan ninyo, straight etong portion na to. Pero dito sa left na lang, merong isang curve dito na parang ang tawag dito sa curve na to is cardiac notch. Bakit ganito yung itsura or bakit ganito yung ano ng left lung? It's because nagiging ganito siya to accommodate yung mismong puso or yung heart. So dito nag-fit in yung mismong heart. Okay? So yun yung main reason kung bakit ganito yung left lung. And yung membrane na nagko-cover sa lungs mismo, kasi ang lungs parang may cellophane siya na bumabalot sa kanya. We call it as the visceral pleura or visceral pleurae. And yung lungs, meron siyang tinatawag na double membrane which is called as the parietal pleura. Pareho siya with the visceral pleura. So etong membrane na to, etong mga membrane na to, these are separated by thin space na called as the pleural cavity filled with pleural fluid. Okay, ano ang function ng pleural fluid na to? Ang function ng fluid na to, merong etong fluid na to para hindi madikit ang lungs pag nag-i-inhale at saka nag-i-exhale doon sa ribs mismo. Okay, or else, syempre, pag wala etong fluid na to, tapos nag-i-inhale at saka nag-i-exhale yung lungs, this would be very painful. Para if nag-move yung lungs, ang ginagawa ni pleural fluid, it will be frictionless para kahit papaano may protection ang lungs natin from any mechanical shocks. Now, there are two types of mechanisms ng pag-breathe. We have the inspiration. So, tapos na tayo no, sa respiratory tract tsaka yung respiratory organ. We now have another topic which is yung mechanisms ng breathing. Okay, so we have the inspiration tapos yung expiration. Magkaiba tong inspiration sa mga pag-ibig ha. Iba to. It is for breathing, no? So, yung intake ng fresh air doon sa alveoli, yun yung tinatawag natin na inspiration. Okay, so this is an active process and it involves the contraction ng mga different muscles. So we have the pharynx muscles. So dito siya, meron dito, no? So merong muscle dito sa part na to and we call that one as the pharynx muscle. So they extend from the diaphragm. So ito yung diaphragm, no? Then to the ribs and vertebral column. Etong brown na to, this is the vertebral column. So ang nangyayari daw dito, if the pharynx muscles will contract, yung diaphragm daw, usually it will be flattened. And as a result, yung thoracic cavity, no? Yung thoracic cavity, it will increase its capacity. Then, second muscle are the external intercostal muscles, which are located between the pairs ng mga ribs. So, eto siya. Ang nangyayari man dito, if they contract etong mga muscles na to, the ribs are usually pulled forward, downward, and outward para ma-increase din yung capacity ng thoracic cavity. Dorsally, ventrally. So meaning to say, paharap at saka paside yung kanyang increase. So that is for external intercostal muscles. Si pharynx muscle naman, pahaba. So to the head and to the feet ang increase ng ating rib cage. Okay, and then we have the diaphragm, which could be found in the abdominal cavity, and it usually separates the abdominal and thoracic cavity. So in addition, ang diaphragm is made up of involuntary muscles and found only in mammals. Take note of this. Ang mga mammals lang ang merong diaphragm and they are supplied with phrenic nerves. So kung i-assess natin kapag during the process of inspiration, yung diaphragm usually nagiging flat. So, nagko-contract siya. While if during expiration naman, yung diaphragm usually nagiging relaxed siya. So yun yung difference during inspiration and expiration sa diaphragm mismo. Okay. So eto na, meron na tayo yung expiration, which is the second mechanism ng breathing. So kung titignan natin yung diaphragm, no? Etong diagram, this is a passive process. So ang ginagawa kapag expiration is na-expel out yung mismong air na merong carbon dioxide. So always take note na nangyayari ang expiration na to due to the reverse movements ng ribs at saka ng diaphragm. Okay? So during expiration, ang diaphragm usually nakarelax siya and it move upward to its original position. So kung titingnan niyo dito, it moves upward to its original position. Now we go on into the next topic, another topic ulit. We have the pulmonary air volumes tsaka yung lung capacities. So we have the instrument that we call as the respirometer. Okay, so ito yung ginagamit natin to measure the changes in the volume of air into tsaka out of the lungs. Okay, then we have the spirogram. Ang spirogram, ito siya. So the graph na showing the changes in the pulmonary volumes and capacities, ito yung tinatawag natin na spirogram. Now, in the spirogram, there are different values. No, there are different values that we should look. So we have apat. We have the tidal volume, the inspiratory reserve volume, the expiratory reserve volume, tsaka yung residual volume. So explain lang natin. Pag sinabi natin na tidal volume, ito yung volume ng air na ini-intake natin or ini-inspire natin or ini-expire natin sa normal breathing without exerting effort. So kung ano man yung nilalanghap mo na papasok or papalabas, no? So just jot it down. Sa normal na breathing daw sa mga lalaki na animals, no? Ito is just based doon sa reference ko. Baka later on meron kayong ibang makita. So okay lang din 'yon. That is also correct. Pero doon sa reference na pinagbasehan ko, ito yung sinabi. So sa mga lalaki daw na animals, ang tidal volume 38.9 ml, no? In average. Tapos sa mga babae naman is 46 ml. So parang ang concept nito is 38.9 ml yung nilalanghap, then 38.9 ml din yung nilalabas. Pero in human, mas mataas siya. If I'm not mistaken, parang around 500 ml in normal breathing, yung sa mga humans. And the next one, we have the IRV and ERV. So, this is the forced inhalation after normal inspiration for IRV. Then, for ERV, this is the forced expiration after normal expiration. So parang ang great example nito is yung pag-sigh natin. Okay? So parang ganito. Ito is yung parang inspiratory reserve volume. Yung sobra, yung very deep, yung pag-inhale mo ng hangin. So kung titingnan niyo etong picture na to, ganito siya. Ganito yung tinatawag natin na inspiratory reserve volume. Yung mismong paglanghap ng forced na inhalation after normal inspiration. Ito naman, dito sa baba, this is yung expiratory reserve volume. Tingnan niyo. Grabe yung pag-sigh niya na parang paglabas ng mismong air. So this is what we call as the expiratory reserve volume. Okay. Then for the residual volume, this is the air that remains in the lungs after a forcible expiration. Ito na yung air na maiiwan sa lungs kahit na mamatay yung organism or kahit na mamatay yung animals natin. So that is residual volume. Okay, now last one, Another topic, no? We have the types of breathing or respiration. So we have 7. First is the coastal breathing or the thoracic breathing. So etong type of breathing na to, it involves a considerable movement of the ribs. So nagre-require ito ng contraction ng mga intercostal muscles kanina. So ang concept lang nito is that as the intercostal muscle relaxes, yung mismong hangin will passively leave the lungs. So parang tinatawag din natin to as shallow breathing, etong costal. Then second one is the abdominal or diaphragmatic breathing, which is a contraction of the diaphragm that produces visible movement of the abdomen. So ito naman is yung type of breathing na nagre-require na mag-contract yung diaphragm. So ang concept naman nito is as the diaphragm relaxes, yung hangin will passively leave the lungs also. So kung sa coastal breathing is we call it as shallow breathing, just take it down, mababaw, shallow breathing, so mababaw lang. Dito naman sa abdominal, we call it as deep breathing, so malalim, deep breathing. Okay, then third one is the eupnea or yung normal and quiet na respiration. So dito, unlike sa first two types ng breathing, for this one, it does not require the cognitive thought ng animal kasi normal lang naman yung breathing. So tinatawag natin to as quiet breathing since yung diaphragm and external intercostal muscles must contract. Okay? So that is for eupnea. Now for the dyspnea, this is now the difficulty of breathing. Yung nasho-shorten ka na ng breath. That is what we call as the dyspnea. So etong type of breathing na to, ito is a usual symptom na ng mga heart at saka lung problems. Like yung pag inatake ka ng asthma or nagkaroon ka ng heart attack, ito yung type of breathing pag ganito na yung scenario. Okay? Then, ito naman, yung apnea, no? This is yung absence or cessation of respiration. Okay, so this is now yung usual na mangyayari, no? Ang usual naman na nangyayari dito sa apnea is ang pinaka-common kasi it's yung disorder na tinatawag natin na sleep apnea, wherein yung breathing nagre-repeat siya, yung breathing repeatedly stops and then it usually starts. Parang ganun yung apnea. There is an absence or cessation of respiration. Then for the sixth one, we have the hyperpnea, which is an increase in depth or rate of breathing or both. So eto naman yung breathing na kapag napagod tayo, kumbaga nag-exercise tayo or we have an intensive activity, yun yung hyperpnea or what we call as the forced breathing. So 'di ba since pagod ka within that scenario, kumbaga nag-jogging ka, nag-exercise ka, usually yung inspiration tsaka expiration nag-o-occur sila both. So of course, nag-o-occur sila, it's because of the muscle contraction. Okay, parang ganito siya. Now for the polypnea, which is the seventh one, this is a rapid shallow breathing naman or yung tinatawag natin as rapid or yung panting respiration, yung nagpapant yung animal. So that is what we call as the polypnea. Okay. Magkaiba si hyperpnea at si polypnea. Si hyperpnea is talagang dahil merong activity or merong intensive na activity. Etong si polypnea, it is because of panting already. Okay. And then last one, na topic natin, we have the TPR or the temperature, pulse rate, and saka yung respiration rate. So I have retrieved this one from the Penn State, no? So ito yung mga rectal temperatures daw ng mga different farm animal species as well as yung kanilang heart rate, no? Yung kanilang pulse rate na tinatawag natin, yung beats per minute, tapos yung respiration rate. Okay, so ito yung magiging or ito yung gagawin ninyo as your next na laboratory exercise. So, this now ends my discussion about the respiratory system, and I hope na with this discussion you have learned something. So, thank you very much for listening.